Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Veronica, and I'm marketing manager at Marosa. Just before we start, I would like to remind you of our housekeeping rules. So this session will be recorded, and we're going to share it afterwards, including the presentation slides. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function, and we will address them at our dedicated session. So in today's webinar, we will cover key aspects in e-invoicing and e-reporting obligations. We'll talk about timelines, scope, penalties, about practical aspects, for example, how to register an SPV account and present a case study on data quality. And as you can see today, we have two presenters with us. First, you will hear from Alexia Garcia, our senior tax advisor and knowledge lead. She works very closely with our compliance team and is responsible for keeping team and different external audiences updated on EU VAT and e-invoicing changes. Later, we're going to have our CEO, Pedro Pestana da Silva, explain technical aspects, present use case, talk you through about the short-term solution with the Excel and the API transition. So he has over 15 years of experience in European VAT compliance, tax automation, and tax technology. And at the end, as mentioned, we're going to leave you enough time for all of your questions. So let's dive into it. Alexia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veronica, as always, for your nice introduction. So as you all know, Romania has just introduced two new obligations, which are the e-invoicing and e-reporting mandates. All Romanian taxpayers are impacted by these new obligations at a different level, both established and non-established businesses. So the purpose of this webinar is to provide you with an overview of these new obligations, how they are implemented in Romania, and how Marosa can help you to be compliant. To start with, we must understand what e-invoicing and e-reporting obligations are. So what's an electronic invoice? You have probably read or heard many times about the definition of an electronic invoice. I will just repeat the main concepts around this e-invoicing definition. And first is an electronic invoice must have a structured electronic format. And second, it must allow for the automatic and electronic processing. So the main goal of an electronic invoice is to be able to process the invoice data automatically. This is why even though some documents have an electronic format, however, they may not qualify as an electronic invoice. For example, an PDF invoice that we send over the email to a customer. As you know, there is a big regulatory trend in Europe, but also around the world, implementing e-invoicing mandates. For governments, electronic invoices are powerful tools to fight VAT fraud and the VAT gap. And when we talk about e-invoicing mandates, we must connect them with digital reporting requirements, which basically means that the tax authorities do not only require taxpayers to issue an invoice in a certain structured format, but also impose the obligation to report all this data to them in these digital reporting requirements. So basically, all transaction data is visible for the tax administration. And what about the Romanian e-invoicing mandate? Well, the Romania government, as we have just said, has implemented as of this year the obligation to issue and transmit electronic invoices through a national platform called e-Factura. This obligation concerns supplies of goods and services that are located in Romania in B2B transactions and between taxable persons that are established in Romania. We will go more in detail about the scope and who is affected by this mandate later on in this webinar. As a side note, we must mention that Romania had already implemented an invoice mandate for B2G transactions. This is business to government invoices, and also a B2B invoicing mandate for certain transactions when they involved trade with products of high risk. This is products that are more sensitive to VAT fraud. Now, as of this year, they are basically extending the scope to all B2B transactions. And we said that an electronic invoice must have a structured and electronic format. What is the case for the Romanian e-invoicing mandate? Well, the structured in this case, or the specific format is called the Romanian SIUS, which is compliant with the European standard EN 16931. SIUS stands for Core Invoice Usage Specification, and it basically, a SIUS determines the actual implementation of an invoice standard, in this case, the European standard, and it adapts to the country rules, in this case, Romanian country rules. I don't know, Pedro, if you want to add something here?
Yes, if I can. I did wanted to add my 2 pennies around the SIOS, because it's always something a little complex to understand. It gets messy when you go down to the EN 16931 and the SIOS, yet it's quite important. The SIOS, country SIOS, in this case Romanian SIOS, is nothing but an adoption of the EU standard. You have an EU standard, which is the EN 16931. That is a term that we will hear about a lot. And then you have the SIOS, which is a country adoption of that standard. Romania has done his, but then you have Portuguese SIOS, you have other country SIOS as well. In practice, what that means is that whenever certain fields, certain data objects in the XML are optional under this EU standard, they might become mandatory, or they might be limited to some extent in the country standard, in this case in the Romanian standard. For example, the customer VAT number is an optional field in the EU standard. Well, in the Romanian standard, it's a mandatory field. And that explains that country SIOS concept, which it is worth understanding, because we see it now in Romania, but we will see it in all other countries in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my two pennies. Thank you, Romania, Alexia.
Thank you, Pedro. And continuing with this e-invoicing format in Romania, as Pedro explained, this is basically compliant with European standards. So accordingly, the syntaxes, which means the machine-readable language that are accepted within these Romanian SIUs, are the UBL and CII. These are syntaxes that existed for a long time and were adopted by the European standard. And concerning the semantic specification, this means the specific content data, the fields of information that must be completed in the Romanian invoices. Well, you can see an extract in the slide from the information that the tax authorities posted online. So this is basically uploaded in the tax authorities website. Concerning the e-invoicing process in Romania, as it is established and planned in the legislation, we can distinguish these 4 steps. First of all, the data is sent by the supplier, so all taxpayers must submit electronic invoices to the Romanian platform e-Factura in an XML format. The deadline for doing so is 5 calendar days. Once this invoice is uploaded in the e-Factura platform, the tax authorities will carry out some checks and validations. So they will either approve or reject the invoice. If we hope the invoice is validated by the tax administration, then the platform will generate a digitally signed XML, which will be considered the valid invoice. So very important, only the XML file with the signature from the Ministry of Finance is the one that will be considered the original and valid invoice for that transaction. And as a 4th step, this invoice must be downloaded from e-Factura platform. Particularly important to remark that the customers, the recipient of the invoice, has the obligation to connect and to download these XML files signed. This is crucial, for example, for VAT refund purposes, because, as I said, this will be the only original invoice for the transaction. Just concerning the 5 calendar days deadline that I mentioned, 2 remarks. One is that any error message that the platform generates during this checks and validation phase, it must be handled within the 5 calendar days deadline. And second remark, as a recent release, an amendment or clarification issued by the tax authorities, it is established that if the e-factura platform is not functional for more than 24 hours, then the transmission obligations are suspended until the platform is operational again. So in conclusion, it is important not to wait until the 5th day of the deadline to submit electronic invoices, because maybe you will have to handle errors issued by the platform, and maybe the platform will have some technical issues, and it's only after the 24 hours that the deadline is suspended, but not before. So this is important to act quickly and ahead of the deadline. Moving on to the next slide. Concerning the CTC models, you know this CTC stands for Continuous Transactions Controls, and basically it's a theoretical concept on how governments, authorities are implementing controls at the transaction levels in different countries. So in this case, from a CTC perspective, we can identify that the Romanian e-invoicing model is a centralized model, basically because we can identify a public platform through which the invoices are issued. There's a validation process, and they are also exchanged with the final customer through this platform. Also important to mention here that both supplier, Romanian established supplier, and customer must be connected to this Romanian platform for the exchange of the invoice. So now, next slide. You are probably familiar with the 4-corner model. This is the Pepo Standard. Basically, is also a theoretical concept that helps us understanding how invoices or electronic documents can be exchanged between a supplier and a customer. Here it is important that there is interoperability between the systems. And when we are in the scenario when there is a e-invoicing mandate, like it's the case for the Romanian e-invoicing, we will see a 5th corner, which is the tax authorities, basically. So when the tax authorities are involved in the issuance of the invoice, we will see this 5th or in some even 6th corner of the tax authorities. So basically, we have corner 1, which is the supplier, and corner 4, which is the customer. Each of them have their own softwares for e-invoicing production and probably different service providers. What is important in this case is that these softwares are compatible and connected to the tax authorities platform, in this case, e-factura. So all the issuance process of the e-invoice will go through e-factura, and also the customer will have to connect to e-factura to download the original electronic invoice. Okay, so far we have talked about the e-invoicing. We said that there are 2 new obligations coming in Romania this year. So the second one is the e-reporting. This is basically a real-time reporting obligation. This is the obligation to report or to submit the invoice data electronically in the national electronic system, e-factura, in XML format. Again, here we have a 5 working days deadline to do this submission. And what about the implementation schedule? So as you can see in the slide, we have an implementation in 2 stages. Basically, we have a first phase that starts from 1st January this year and goes until the end of June. And during this phase, both Romanian established entities and non-established entities, basically VAT registered or with a VAT identification number in Romania, we are subject to the e-reporting obligation, the one I just mentioned in the previous slide. So after 1st July, what will happen? Well, that non-established entities with a VAT registration number in Romania, Romanian taxpayers, but foreign businesses, they will continue subject to the e-reporting obligation. However, the Romanian established entities will move to the e-invoicing obligation. So basically, Romanian established entities, as from the 1st of July, will have the obligation to issue electronic invoices and exchange them through the e-factura platform. Here we can also mention there is a grace period that has been also recently extended until the end of June. And this grace period applies to the e-reporting obligation. So no penalties will be applied for the invoices issued during 1st of January this year until the end of June this year. But important remark here is that the e-reporting obligation still persists, even if there are no penalties to be applied. The obligation exists, so at a later stage, the tax authorities may come back to you and ask you to report all those invoices in the e-reporting. And concerning the scope and who's affected. So I will start by who is affected by each of these obligations. Concerning, we already mentioned a bit, but for the e-reporting, we said that during this first phase, from 1st of January until the end of June, both Romanian established entities and non-established entities will be subject to e-reporting. However, when it comes to Romanian established entities, as from 1st of July, they will move to e-invoicing mandate. So e-invoicing will only impact on, is an obligation only on Romanian established entities. And what about the scope, the transactions included? Well, in both cases, it will impact on domestic transactions located in Romania, in the B2B area. This is in the business to business. The main difference here concerns the customer requirements, let's say. So in the e-reporting, you will have to report domestic B2B transactions issued to businesses that are maybe foreign businesses with a VAT identification number in Romania. However, in the e-invoicing, you will only have to report, or it's only subject to this obligation, the domestic B2B transactions between Romanian established businesses. So the customer has to be a Romanian established business. And what about transactions excluded? Well, this is according to the legislation. Basically, from e-reporting, it is specified that exports and intercommunity supplies are excluded. Also, certain service invoices that do not comply with Romanian invoicing requirements or are not subject to Romanian invoicing requirements. Also, invoices issued to non-established businesses without a VAT number in Romania, and simplified invoices according to Romanian legislation. And what transactions are excluded from e-invoicing? Well, it is only stated that simplified invoices are excluded. However, as already mentioned, the scope of e-invoicing is narrowed down only to B2B domestic transactions between established businesses in Romania. And what about the voluntary use of e-invoicing? Well, basically, it will be up to the agreement between the parties. I don't know, Pedro, if you want to add something here on e-reporting. Pedro, I think you are mute.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Alexia, for letting me know. Indeed, I did want to add a couple of things, and I noticed there were a couple of questions in the Q&A section too about e-reporting versus e-invoicing. So e-reporting is indeed informative. You, as non-established company, for example, are sending your invoices to the tax authorities, irrespective of how they were issued. You put them in an XML format and you send it to them. But you can still send your PDF invoices, your classic PDF invoices, to your clients via email as you used to. Yeah, they are still valid invoices. Except that you need to report those invoices in XML2 to the tax authorities. As for your purchases, as a non-established company, yes, your suppliers, again, will need to issue their invoices and report them to the tax authorities. So if they are established, for example, they will send them to ANAF. and they will be sitting there. But in addition, you are not required to receive invoices via ANAP, so you can still receive them via email. So to the point from Marius in one of his his questions, you can still deduct VAT on PDF invoices as non-established company. However, all the input VAT that you will deduct, or most of it, and I will elaborate on that, will be sitting on ANAP's database. And all the output VAT that you will report in your VAT return will also be sitting on the tax authority's database. So in the end, your VAT return will need to reconcile with those amounts. Certainly for your output, that will always be the same. And for your input VAT, every time you have input from established suppliers, it will be sitting on the tax authority's database. There is a possibility that you have input VAT, say, from an invoice issued by a non-established supplier. But normally that will also be sitting. So in practice, what that means is that e-reporting becomes almost like a clearance model. So for you to have valid input VAT recognized by the tax authorities in your VAT return, you should expect that that input VAT and output should reconcile with the data sitting at the tax authorities database as reported via ANAP in the SPV account. For those who have experience with Spain, for example, where you get automatic letters whenever VAT return and SII in this case do not reconcile, it's a similar scenario. So your data reported on a transactional basis in real time needs to reconcile with your data reported on a summarized basis in your VAT return and local listings as it applies in Romania too. So that's indeed what I wanted to add, because in practice, it sounds like it's informative, but it's a heavy impact on everyone's monthly reporting work.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro, for making the remark. And well, I'm moving to the next slide, last from my side. Well, sorry, it's not the last one for me. Just a very quick comparison between e-invoicing versus e-reporting, just a summary of what we have just mentioned. So e-invoicing will impact on both the issuer of the invoice and the recipient of the invoice. While as for the reporting, this is only a reporting obligation from the supplier side. Both are real time. We have this 5 working or calendar days deadline, depending if we are talking about e-invoicing, it's 5 calendar days, e-reporting 5 working days. Concerning the scope, we said that e-invoicing only applies to domestic supplies, B2B, where we know there is also a B2G mandate, but it's not what we are discussing in this session. And also for e-reporting, again, is only for domestic supplies. The difference here is that you will also include in the e-reporting those invoices issued to foreign businesses with a VAT identification in Romania, as long as the transaction is a domestic transaction in Romania. And as for who is impacted by this mandate, e-invoicing only for Romanian established companies, both in the issuer and the recipient side. And e-reporting, it's both for established and non-established businesses that have a VAT registration number in Romania. And just very quick to finalize with my part. This is just a table summarizing the penalties that are maybe applicable to these obligations. Just mentioning that all penalties for e-reporting or e-invoicing will start as from 1st July this year. We have for e-reporting penalties ranging from 1,000 lei to 10,000 lei, while for the e-invoicing it is established a 15% penalty on the value of the invoice, including both the net and the VAT values. And now I pass on the word to Pedro. I will stop sharing my screen.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Alexia. I was busy. I think it's one of the best times when I do a webinar and I started speaking at the end, and I was busy doing all the questions and answers, which were very interesting. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. Let me know if you can see the screen, Veronica.
Yeah, it's all good. Great. Perfect.
Right. There were a couple of very interesting questions that I will respond to in the end because I didn't have time. But in any case, I'll try to go slightly quick through the topics that I will explain, and then we dedicate some time to those questions, which I guess are well, as I said, they are very valid, very interesting for everyone in the audience. We've gone through setting up the entire software capability to submit invoices. And the software part, the coding part, to be fair, was the easy one. Where we encountered more work was on the admin part. So what I want here to explain is our experience. How did we do to set up all the admin part and get everything running? And then as well, touch base on what it means for everyone who is not willing to do it and what alternatives there are. For a start, if you want to have your own solution, you need to be either a Romanian established company or get a Romanian identification number. So someone in your team could get a Romanian identification number. They will go to the embassy, whatever, and they will get that number. Once they have that number, they will be able to get a digital certificate linked to that number. Yeah. So even for established companies, they will need a digital certificate that is linked to the established company. So that's the first step, which takes some time. The digital certificates often come either on a limited web version or on a USB stick, and then you will need to connect that certificate to your solution. You should also open a development account in SPV. It's an account for developers, and what it does, it allows you to send data automatically through OAuth, which is a method of authentication they use, and it provides you with tokens to send that data. You will also create your SPV account, and once you have the digital certificate, access that SPV account. Before you do so, you will need to kind of authorize your certificate to access SPV accounts. That's another step and process. Then finally, you will need to create Romanian e-invoices in XML as per the Romanian SIOS that I explained earlier, and start testing. To do testing, you need at least one company associated to your SPV account. So if you have problems with that, that's probably the reason. And you will be able to see on your SPV account all the testing that you have done against the tax authorities database. And then very important, you will need, if you have your own solution, to maintain the system and keep it up to date with updates, keep it up to date with legislative changes, keep it up to date with system changes by the tax authorities, etc. So all those steps is quite an onerous list. Need to be done. And again, this is where you want to develop your solution. For example, you have your ERP and you want to you have your own IT team and you want to develop that bridge between your ERP and the Romanian tax authorities. But what do you need to do if you use a third party, an existing software? Well, in that case, you will not only need to sign a power of attorney, and that will authorize that third party to link your company with their SPV account. And once we log in, for example, we see all the clients we have, but any other third party will do, linked to the company linked to the SPV account of the person you authorized. The POA needs to be notarized and it's done with the Hague apostille. So again, not the easiest process, but at least a lot quicker than the alternative. You don't need a Romanian ID, you don't need a digital certificate, you don't need a developer account, and you don't need to be on top of the system updates that you would expect to have if you have your own software. Right, and this part of the session is where we discuss the actual practical aspects that we have encountered in all the work that we've been doing so far. One is data reconciliation, and as I'm sure you know, that is already an issue in every real-time reporting obligation, not in Romania, but everywhere. But let me give you a Romanian example. What you have in front right now is 3 corners out of the 5. So you have the first corner, which is the supplier, the second corner, which is the supplier's software, and then the 5th corner, as we call it, which is the tax authorities. Typically, as Alexia explained earlier on the explanation of these 5 corners, the supplier's ERP will send data to the e-invoicing software. I put these arrows going both ways because the e-invoicing software will likely do at least a first check on that data, a format check, so that your UBL, for example, is the right UBL format, your data requirements are met, etc. Once that is done, it will be sent to the tax authorities. But once the tax authorities receive it, they may always come back with errors. What type of errors? You have logical errors. So are you reporting a transaction with out VAT when the tax authorities, according to the data in the invoice, expect VAT to be charged? And then the other type of error, which we see more often, is data errors. So where your name, for example, of the customer that you are reporting does not match with the name of the customer that the tax authorities expect according to their own database. This is a very important one. And again, if you have experience with other real-time reporting obligations, it's a usual one. In other words, errors on your master data. Now, how do you handle those? You send the data to the tax authorities, you get that error. Normally, you will go back to your ERP, resolve the master data error, and resend the data so that you complete a cycle of error taken, error handled, data resent to the software, who then resends it to the tax authorities website. There is a possibility of handling the error here, particularly in the case of names or even addresses that are wrong regarding master data. And I give you another example. In the invoice data, you need to indicate the full address of your customer and the county, so the region, the province of your customer, and there is a code for it. You could expect that not everyone has that code. So what can you do? You can automatically replace the code on the XML that you are sending and then make a list so you take action and update your master data. Or you can send it all the way back to the master data and do it at that level. But whether you do it here or you do it here, you have to do it. Because if not, in the end, you will have an invoice that wasn't received by the tax authorities, whereas in your system, it was. So there will be a mismatch on your VAT return. So you will need to manage this as part of your daily work. You need to set up responsibilities in your team to handle these errors. And this will be real time. It will not be end of the month work like you used to with VAT returns. This will be ongoing work. And ultimately, you will be needing to monitor the errors that you might get. So this is quite important. It changes the way we work in the VAT space, and but ultimately will help all businesses improve their data, because this cycle right here that I'm showing on your screen works like a cycle, like a machine washing the data, and it's important to take action so that you gradually reduce the number of errors. In this next slide, just taking from the last comment, how do you handle errors and how do you comply with Romanian e-invoicing? I wanted to show you what has Marosa to offer and what have we been working on and what is our approach around Romanian e-invoicing. Indeed, we call this webinar Excel first, API later. So let's see what we mean. In this slide, you have the user, so that's you as a business, and you have VATify, which is our software. First remark, you can send the data through API, and that's the usual electronic communication done in tasks automatically and unattended. So in other words, you don't have to worry about data being sent because it's done automatically overnight. Or you can, if your system is not yet ready, send it via Excel. And we see this as a useful solution, particularly in the case of Romania, where things have happened so quick. So in September, they got approval from the Commission. In January, they were implementing this obligation. Well, for everyone who's not ready, considering the first 6 months is e-reporting only, what we offer is send us your data in Excel. We will report it. We will upload it in VATify. VATify will generate the XML and will report it to the tax authorities. But let's go through those steps. So you send it through Excel or API if you're ready. VATify checks your data within our system. So are you an e-reporting or an e-invoicing client? What are your tax codes or the tax data that you have for VAT reporting? Then VATify defines which channel applies, whether it's e-reporting or e-invoicing. Excuse me. And then VATify sends the data to the tax authorities. You see, in e-reporting, there is one arrow with 2 directions. That means we send the data and we get the response, and we might need to resend it again, as I explained in the last slide. And in e-invoicing, there is one arrow with 2 directions where you send the data and you get the response and you take action if it's wrong. But then one arrow that only comes towards you. What is that arrow? That's the accounts payable invoices. That's received invoices, and this is issued invoices. Depending on what you get from the tax authorities, there will be emails being sent to you, so you don't have to log in every day, telling you if the invoices have been successfully or unsuccessfully submitted, and if unsuccessfully, what are the errors identified by the tax authorities. And finally, where do we stand out? Where is VATify better solution in our view? We will take that data and we will reuse it for your VAT returns. So VATify was born as a VAT reporting tool. So what we're doing is we're adding an entire feature for e-invoicing, and we are reusing the data in all your VAT returns. Yeah. So when you log into your monthly VAT return in Romania, you will have a list of suggested transactions. So those are the transactions that we have used, for example, on your e-reporting. You don't have to upload them again. And on top of that, you will easily see what is sitting on the tax authorities database. So going back to my comment earlier about e-reporting being important because it has to reconcile with the tax authorities, you will do that reconciliation in real time. So I think we're really adding value with VATify. For everyone who doesn't know it so well, VATify, it's a multi-country e-invoicing solution where our dev team is working hard on an ambitious roadmap as well for all countries. It's a global VAT reporting. It has been a global VAT reporting for a period of time already. That means automatic VAT returns, automatic checks, automatic data analysis, and it's a governance and control tool. So this VATify is the tool that your team uses to manage their VAT compliance. You can use it as a tool with Marosa's support. So you give all the work to us and we use the tool to communicate with you and it's handled, or you can use it as a pure SaaS. So VATify is a nice tool to use as an in-house SaaS license solution. So in case, for example, you're considering, you already have an in-house team and you want a tool, this is a good choice. If you do not have an in-house team yet, but you are considering moving things in-house into an insourcing or a cost-sourcing model, VATify is a perfect tool to help you doing that.